They thought I was just a single mom, tired, worn down, barely keeping her farm afloat. To them, I was an easy target. Weak, vulnerable, someone they could scare, rob, and leave broken. What they didn't know was that I'd spent years overseas serving in the military, learning how to keep calm when chaos exploded all around me, how to fight back when the odds weren't in my favor. So when they came creeping onto my land, whispering threats and breaking glass, they thought they were the hunters. They had no idea they'd just walked into the lion's den. Life as a single mother is already a battlefield, though one most people don't see. Every day I woke up at 4:30, even before the sun painted the horizon with its dull gray light. My hands were cracked and raw from tending animals. My back ached from hauling feed, and my mind never really rested because I had 2 children depending on me. There was no one else to fall back on. Bills stacked up faster than I could pay them, and the farm was constantly one bad harvest away from collapse. To the outside world, I probably looked like a struggling widow doing her best to keep things together. And that wasn't entirely wrong. But what people didn't know was that I carried a past with me. One forged in deserts and war zones, where every decision could mean life or death. I had promised myself I'd left that world behind when I came back home, but that promise would soon be broken, not by my choice, but by 3 men who thought I was just prey waiting to be devoured. The first signs were subtle. One morning, I noticed tire tracks in the dirt near the tree line, not from any of my vehicles. At first, I brushed it off, maybe kids turning around after a party, but then my tools started disappearing. First a wrench, then a pair of shears. It wasn't much, but it was enough to make me uneasy. My dogs grew restless at night, barking and growling at shadows that seemed thicker than usual. I told myself I was being paranoid, but deep down my instincts, the ones that had kept me alive in the military, were screaming that something was wrong. One evening, I stood on the porch with a cup of lukewarm coffee, staring at the dark stretch of land beyond the barn. The wind rustled through the trees, but in between the gusts, I could hear it. Faint crunches of footsteps, too deliberate to be animals. My stomach tightened. I wasn't scared, not yet, but I was alert, every nerve firing the way it used to when I was out on patrol overseas. I knew eyes were on me. Whoever they were testing me, watching, waiting. And I knew it was only a matter of time before they came closer. That night, I barely slept. I checked the locks twice, made sure the shotgun was loaded, and kept my children close. They were both young, too young to understand why Mom sometimes stared out the window for hours, or why I insisted they practice hiding in the crawl space under the house. I told them it was a game, a storm drill, but in truth, I was preparing them for something darker. 2 nights later, it happened. The sound of glass shattering ripped through the quiet like a gunshot. My body reacted before my mind did. In one smooth motion I was out of bed, barefoot but steady, my heart hammering not with panic but with precision. I shook my kids awake, whispered for them to go to the crawl space, my voice calm even though adrenaline roared through me like fire. They didn't cry. They didn't argue. They knew when I used that tone. They had to obey. I pressed my ear to the hallway wall, listening. 3 voices, low but mocking. Male, confident. "Where's the money, lady?" one called, followed by cruel laughter. Another muttered something about making her pay. My jaw clenched. They weren't just here to rob me. They wanted fear. They wanted to intimidate. Maybe worse. And that was a line they should never have crossed. I moved through the house in silence, my bare feet barely whispering against the wooden floor. Every sound became a weapon I could use or avoid. A floorboard that creaked under too much weight, a shadow that stretched too far under the moonlight. They thought I was asleep, vulnerable. They didn't know I'd spent years training to be invisible, to strike without warning. I spotted the first one near the kitchen, crowbar in hand, rifling through drawers. His back was turned. I exhaled slowly, centered myself, and then, quick, efficient, struck. My knee drove into his side, my elbow cracked against his jaw, and before he could even scream, he was down on the floor, groaning, dazed. His crowbar clattered uselessly. My hands didn't shake. My mind was clear. "Did you hear that?" another voice called. Heavy boots stomped across the living room. I crouched behind the counter, gripping the crowbar now in my hands. The second man appeared, flashlight beam cutting through the dark. He froze when the light caught me. For a second he smirked, probably thinking he had me cornered. But his smirk evaporated when he saw the way I held myself. Not like a victim, but like a soldier ready to strike. I swung the crowbar with every ounce of force, connecting with his wrist. The flashlight clattered to the floor. He howled, clutching his arm. In the chaos, I kicked the shotgun out of his grasp. I scooped it up, and in one fluid motion leveled it at his chest. The look in his eyes was priceless. Shock, fear, disbelief. He saw a farmer's widow moments earlier. Now he saw what I really was. The third man, realizing things were going sideways, shouted a curse and bolted for the door. I let him run. Cowards always reveal themselves when the fire gets hot. But as he stumbled out, I shouted after him, my voice low and sharp, "Tell your friends, you picked the wrong house." The man with the broken wrist whimpered, backing toward the wall. I kept the shotgun trained on him while I yanked a pair of heavy-duty zip ties from the drawer. Within minutes, both him and his unconscious buddy were secured, wrists bound tight. By the time the sheriff arrived, delayed as always, they were lying face down on my kitchen floor, helpless and humiliated. The deputies were wide-eyed when they saw the scene. "Ma'am, you took down 2 armed men by yourself?" one asked, disbelief clear in his voice. I didn't answer right away. I just checked on my kids, pulled them out of the crawl space, held them close. They were safe. That was all that mattered. Then I finally turned back to the officer and said evenly, "They thought I was weak. They were wrong." But revenge doesn't always end with arrests. Word spread fast around town. People whispered about the single mom who took down armed criminals without breaking a sweat. The men who ran off never dared return, though I heard through the grapevine they couldn't stop talking about the crazy woman on the farm. Crazy? No. Prepared. Unbreakable. For weeks after, I replayed that night in my mind, not with trauma, but with clarity. I thought about how close those men had come to hurting my children, how they looked at me as nothing more than prey. And every time I remembered their faces, pale with fear when they realized I wasn't who they thought I was, I felt something powerful, a release, a vindication. People underestimate mothers all the time. They see the exhaustion, the soft voice, the endless sacrifices, and assume weakness. But what they don't understand is that protecting our children awakens something primal, something unshakable. And when that instinct collides with military training, there's no force stronger. That night, those men learned a lesson they'll never forget. Never mistake kindness for weakness, and never, ever threaten a mother's children. Because the sweetest revenge isn't just seeing justice served, it is making sure those who sought to break you leave shattered instead. So when you hear stories about wolves lurking in the dark, remember this one. Sometimes the wolves aren't the predators. Sometimes they stumble into a den guarded by a lioness who knows exactly how to fight. And when that happens, the ending is always the same. The so-called hunters become the hunted, and the prey walks away stronger than ever. And as for me, I tucked my children into bed that night, kissed their foreheads, and whispered a promise. No matter what, no matter who, I will always protect you, because that's what a mother does, and God help anyone foolish enough to forget it.